All right. I think we're live. I'm here with
Awesome.
Yuval Kordov, author of The Hand of God and All of Our Sins. How's it going, man?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm excited to get going here.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I guess if you wanted to, you could just give a brief description of your books, The Hand of God and All of Our Sins. I have them both right here, both excellent
Great.
pieces of fiction. But you want to tell people what they're about, just in case
Yeah.
someone hasn't heard somehow?
Uh, so you're going to start with the hardest question, which is what's your book about, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So it's kind of genre mash of um actually, I won't even start there. What's it about? So it's a story that is um takes place in between near future and 500 years in the future, mostly the latter, after two apocalypses. So that's kind of the whole shtick is there wasn't just one apocalypse, there was two. So as it says in the book, the first apocalypse was World War III, and the second apocalypse was by the hand of God. And things got a little bit dicey after that. So, yeah, it's a mix of sci-fi, post-apocalyptic, fantasy, um, so on and so forth. And the moniker I've been using is Old Testament Gothic,
I love it.
is what I call it. So, yeah, that's
That's
what it is in a nutshell.
Yeah, that's the perfect description. Old Testament Gothic. I feel like one. So you mentioned sci-fi and fantasy, but I feel like horror is also a big part of it.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Like it's a funny thing. Like even like just pragmatically, when I was publishing the books and thinking about categories to put them in, or like advertising or contests or whatever, I'm like, this has a lot of horror in it, but it's interesting because so much of what people think of as horror is pretty like just like contemporary horror, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily horror um, like cosmic horror or like alien horror, like the movie Alien,
Right.
or horror that's a part of other genres. But it definitely is like it's if anything, that's probably the thing that binds the sci-fi to the fantasy, I guess.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. I feel like a lot of sci-fi sort of has horror hidden in it in a way.
Yeah.
Yours definitely brings it to the surface, like the grotesque hares that Esther has to hunt. I love those things. The hellhounds attacking Helio, and like, of course, like the demons whispering in people's minds and everything.
Yeah, it's fun. It's a fun thing. I love. Some people it drives them crazy, but I love that space between what's real and what's imagined, uh, or yeah, just that space in between, not knowing if you're actually experiencing reality or not, but not necessarily like it's all a dream. Just being in a world of like magic realism, kind of taken to its most dark ends.
Yeah. For some reason, like a little chat bubble popped up. Like, I don't know if it like recognized you,
Oh,
almost
did
did
I
like a
do
thumbs up.
like thumbs up?
Oh my
Yeah,
god,
it's like
it's like paying attention to that somehow.
I know.
It
Yeah,
just did fire up.
Apple's watching everything we do.
Yeah, I had no idea that that was a feature on this platform. Good to know, I
You're
guess.
welcome. You're welcome.
Um, Man, that totally sidetracked my train of thought here. Um, yeah, I mean, do you read a lot of horror? Because I feel like that part of the series is one of my favorite parts. Is you just do it so
You
well.
know, I kind of read what I read. Like I'm a, I guess like you call it like a mood reader. It's just like I don't read like a ton of fantasy anymore, although I grew up reading nothing but fantasy.
Hmm.
So what I'm reading now, I'm mostly reading like sci-fi that hits some sort of sweet spot for me in the moment, right? And usually that's something that has, yeah, like some aspects of horror, some like religious themes, something beyond just cold. Like, oh, here's another like transhumanist, like science fiction book about,
Hmm.
you know, orbital physics, or just the standard kind of stuff that you see or read in sci-fi books. So I always look for like those intersections of weirdness, I guess. Um, and yeah, it's always been what's appealed to me.
Nice. Yeah,
Yeah.
I like that term, the intersections of weirdness.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah, and like I know it's getting ripe by now, but I posted a while ago. I'd reread Hyperion by Dan Simmons,
yeah,
and I really do. It's funny, like as writers, it's so hard for us. Like there's that whole thing where you have to like find similar authors, or if you like this, then you like me. And Hyperion had stuck with me for literally decades, and then I reread it, and I was like, oh my god, this is why I loved it so much because it
yeah, it holds
really
up.
is. It's just like it's funny like it hits that perfect intersection of weirdness, plus like a whole lot of sexy times which I'd forgotten about, but I was blushing a bit while reading it, but
I didn't
um
remember all those parts either.
oh man, yeah, it's it it hits hard, but yeah, amazing, just amazing prose, kind
Oh
of
yeah,
again like genre mashing, but yeah, I love that kind of stuff.
just like sorry, I feel like we're gonna go into like a Hyperion tangent now, but like the stuff that really sticks with me from that book, like first of all, the Shrike, of course,
Hmm.
is just such a crazy concept, but the short story about the guy who gets like crucified, and
Yeah,
like
Father Hoyt.
yeah,
Yeah,
that
yeah,
like I don't think I'll ever forget that. That's
yeah.
sort of
No, it
like
was
Old
amazing.
Testament sci-fi too.
Yeah, that and the Scholar's Tale. Like I
Hmm.
was literally crying, and I can't remember the last time I would have cried reading a book. Just like incredible stuff, and it's an interesting book because you can just read the first one, and nothing will be explained, and that's okay because it's just such an incredible story.
Hmm.
I actually I started rereading the sequel, and I wasn't going to. I was like, you know what, I'll just leave it at the first one because you don't always have to know. And then I DNF'd like 10 books, and I was like, okay, I'm just gonna reread the sequel, and then I'm probably just gonna reread the third one and just reread the fourth one, even though they're not as good. But yeah, it's hard to find those things that just hit that sweet spot, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I've heard the unfortunately the third and fourth aren't as good. I
yeah,
stopped before I got to those.
yeah. It's like anything. You just like too much of anything is rarely good.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah,
So bringing it back to your books, because I'm
yeah.
sure we could talk about Dan Simmons for a while. But this takes place in like a wasteland of North America, essentially, right?
Sorry, you cut out there for a second. Can
Oh
you?
yeah, I think you cut out for a sec too.
Oh, I cut
Yes,
out for. I was probably my kids
both of
watching
us.
SpongeBob upstairs.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Um, so the hand of God and all of our sins, Dark Legacies. Yeah, I'm saying that right. Takes place in a wasteland of like North America, right?
Hmm.
So we've got Cathedral in the west, we got Bastion in the east, and I
Yeah.
guess the Union Hub sort of somewhere in between in the middle.
Yeah.
Um, di- so I sort of imagine these. I don't know if this is something you'd want to answer.
Oh man, we're getting right into it. It's so funny. I
Yeah.
love it. Yeah.
So
Yeah. Go for it.
awesome. I imagine Bastion as like New York because of the metro and everything, and sort of
Yeah.
Cathedral as Chicago maybe, and then the Union Hub as like Detroit. But
Oh,
I,
interesting. Yeah. You don't have enough range. You're
that's
close
what I
on
was thinking.
Bastion.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was thinking that I may not be thinking big enough, and maybe like
Yeah.
Cathedral's
It's
like
a
San
funny thing.
Francisco or something.
Yeah, so it's a funny thing. Actually, man, I was in San Francisco a few weeks ago, and I was there. I was by the ocean in the evening, and it was just terrifying. I'm terrified of the ocean. Like you'll probably see like a lot of stuff in my books around like Sea of Screams and like the susurrations and the waves and the deconstructed bodies and how terrifying the ocean is, and that's because I am terrified of the ocean. Like
Oh, that's
like it's
perfect.
just it's just it's too big. It's too big. Um, but yeah, it's a funny thing when I was writing the books because I know where everything takes place.
Yeah.
But even I have a bit of fuzziness because of the second apocalypse, right? So the
Hmm.
second apocalypse, it's a little bit of a convenient, um, you know, story element, but it literally reconstructed the world to an extent, right?
Mm.
So you have nuclear Armageddon, but then you have like truly like tectonic, like enormous shifts. I mean, there is no more moon, although
Oh
like
wow,
as
I
far
didn't
as
know that.
where the moons where the moon and the stars are, that's something that's left more to mystery. But so there's a lot of room in there for ambiguity. but I don't want to be like so vague that I'm like, oh, it could be wherever. So you'll hear it here first that um, Bastion is like Southern Ontario. Um,
Okay.
and I hinted that a bit with some of the the French Canadian sounding names.
Yeah.
So Southern Ontario, Southern Quebec, that kind of area. The kind of this notion of Great Lakes dried up, don't no longer exist. Different migrations of people landing in different places. Um, the Union, so the Scavrats, they're mostly around like Montana, Wyoming,
Mm.
that kind of area. And then Cathedral, um, Cathedral is kind of funny. So I live in a city called Calgary, Alberta, and in my mind, Cathedral is in Calgary in
Okay.
500 years in the future, which is funny because it's a pretty like straight up city, that it has like zero gothic soul. But I was like, you know what, let's just do this a little bit meta and do that. And then there's a lot of the novel takes place in kind of like southern Alberta, northern Montana, that kind of area. And then there's a lot of travel, right? And I get into that
Yeah.
in book 3. So in book 3 there's actually a part where it takes some people like 2+ days to get from Bastion to New Haven, right? So
Mhm.
it's kind of an interesting thing. Like I wanted there to be a little bit tighter centering of the locations, just for ease of honestly like ease of story construction. Like it's
Yeah.
hard in a story when it's like these giant distances. But I really wanted things to be where they were. And so that led me into like the development of the Deadlands. And then it became, the landscape is a character and travel is important because of the state of the world. And there's a lot of travel in book 3. And it's not just driving down an old highway, right? It's you are in the thick of the nightmare that is, this
Yeah.
double apocalyptic world, right? So
Yeah.
so
When
yeah,
you're
so
in the
there you go.
Deadlands, they're like just the presence of the Deadlands like is enough to drive people insane.
Yeah, yeah. So A11's chapters in book 1, those were in Montana.
Okay. So
Yeah.
yeah, what happened here was I like accidentally put my American bias on it. I was like, oh, it must be New York because it's in the east.
Well, no, I mean, and it could be, right? I mean, actually, and you're not the first person to guess that. But yeah, yeah.
It makes more sense that you're a Canadian author to use Canadian cities as your
I got to
reference.
represent at least a little bit, right?
Yeah, no, that's totally fair. So then, I guess the Hellmouth is sort of like deep south, right? Like, so
The
I just
Hellmouth
picture
is
like
like southwest.
southwest.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. It's a funny thing. So, like when I was first writing the book, I was kind of undecided on where and what the Hellmouth should be. It was either going to be the Sea of Screams, because that is significant. It was going to be some other location, or it was actually going to be Cathedral itself,
Mm.
um, as a kind of a twist. But where I settled was, um, without with half spoiling it, I'll say, um, the Hellmouth has already appeared in one of the books,
Oh.
um, and it will appear again at the end of book 3.
When you say appeared, you mean like physically appeared, not as like one of Rebecca Six's sort of prophetic visions or anything like that?
It's a locale that has appeared in
Interesting.
book 1. Yeah,
Oh man,
yeah,
now I'm gonna be scouring book one.
yeah. Yeah, it's a funny thing. I love the Sea of Screams. It's one of my favorite things. And actually, when I wrote the original Dark Legacies RPG like 20 years ago, I had like various different locations, and the Sea of Screams was just one of them. But the more I thought about like this reboot and everything, like it really became pivotal, and it's going to have its own significance that's quite important in book 3. And like it's similar to the Deadlands, right? I mean, a lot
Mm.
of my world, and this is why I've resisted making a map, is a lot of the world exists in a metaphysical state, because
Mm.
there's a lot of supernatural stuff happening. There's a lot of breakage of reality, And even though I'm saying, well, Bastion's here and Hub is here, you know, the Deadlands is the perfect example. It can't be mapped.
Right.
It just exists superimposed onto the Earth. And the Sea of Screams is similar. Hellmouth is somewhat similar, but yeah, I mean, it's tough, right? Because as you're reading, as a reader, it helps to be able to visualize. So I hope that I've done a good enough job. Even the fact that you know that Cathedral's in the west and Bastion's in the east and Hub's in the center, that's like a sigh of relief for me. Because honestly, as basic as that sounds, I'm like, thank God I at least like conveyed that, right? Because sometimes you can be too gray area, right? And then
Yeah.
people just get off.
It's hard to convey literally anything in terms of geography in books. Like
Yeah.
I think of this Mark Lawrence blog post where he talks about the library trilogy that he's releasing right now, and he talks about how like it's described over and over again that the rooms in the library are these big square rooms, and yet one of his readers thought that they were all like circles and pictured them as circles. And he's
Yeah.
like, I'm not trying to make fun of this person, I'm just showing you how difficult it is to like make sure everybody's on the same page in what they're picturing.
Yeah, it is tough. And it's not just tough, it's like, then it's like, okay, did I actually write this down or is it just in my head?
Yeah.
Right. And then it's like how much, and that's why beta readers are so important and everything's so important. 'Cause it's like, did I actually say this thing? Or is it just so clear somewhere up here or in a note somewhere that I thought I did? And then when people are confused, I'm like, what do you mean you're confused? So,
Yeah, you're writing like tens of thousands of words and you're like,
yeah.
you have a memory that you wrote this down, but who knows if it survived revisions and everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that happens a lot. um, just, so just adding one more piece of geography here. There's also New Haven, right? Is that New Haven, Connecticut? It's like,
No. So what's funny? It drives my wife crazy because there's a neighborhood in Calgary called New Haven. And
okay.
she's like, every time I read New Haven, I think I'm like in this neighborhood and it just takes me out of it. I'm like, I know. But no, but I mean, there's probably like 50 New Havens
Oh yeah.
or 1,000 New Havens in Canada and America, right? But, something it seems a bit boring, but something I strove for when I was writing locations and names and everything in these books is I wanted them to be kind of realistic and familiar. And like a lot of place names are kind of boring, right? Or they're just boring combo words, of like Newtown or this or that, right? So, like Hub, Bastion, Cathedral, New Haven, they're all very literal.
Mm-hmm.
But, I did it on purpose. But
no, that makes perfect sense. And like, especially with Clan Ramirez being sort of ousted and needing to find a new haven to live in.
Yeah.
It's perfect.
So New Haven is southern Alberta / Saskatchewan. So it's pretty much directly north of Hub.
Okay. I'm going to be like on Google Maps after we get off the call. Like, where's all this stuff? I have a stupid question here. What's going on in Europe at this time?
In Europe, so what's funny is the original Dark Legacies was continental Europe, and then for this one, I was like, I'm just going to switch it up to continental North America. I have no idea what's happening.
I figured it's outside the scope of the
story. It truly is. Like it's just it's not like it's beyond. It's beyond creation. I don't even know. I have no answer for you.
That's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
So one thing I also want to sort of maybe try and understand a little better here is like the timeline between the apocalypses. So like I came across a tweet thread that you were giving like little bits of trivia or something, and you mentioned that like Esther sort of starts out in like 2035. Like that's when she's a kid, I guess, and then that's when the World War III nuclear war happens. She feels a little too real sometimes. 2035.
Yeah, man, I don't know if we have that long, but hopefully we'll see.
And then you mentioned that she's basically fighting war against the Hellmouth and the legions and everything for like 500 years or something like that.
Yeah, essentially. Yeah, it's a funny thing. Like most people who have a problem with my books have the problem because of the timeline. And it's interesting. Like it's been a real I've had to stick to my guns. So I actually sent a DM to um, Charlie and Craig and Quinn a few months ago, um, and I was like, guys, be honest with me. Like, did my timeline throw you off, or was the payoff at the end worth it? And you know, they're the great guys, and hopefully they were honest, and they all uniformly said it's worth it
Hmm.
to not be sorry. Basically, what I was asking is, should I be more explicit about the timeline, like
Hmm.
literally having like dates or this many years later, or this many years before? And they're all like, no. Like there's payoff in the mystery, and there's payoff in what happens at the end, right? Um, and I also, if you actually read the back blurb of the first book, it says right there that it takes place in the year 2500, right? Now, what I
It
don't
does.
do is,
Yeah, you're right. It's
dude,
the year 2500, give or take. The passage of time has
congratulations.
become as blurry as the gray wastes.
2 books
There you
later,
go.
you've read the blurb. That's excellent. You know, so what I don't do at the end of Esther is say 450 years later, right?
Hmm.
But what I try to do is like thematic transitions. Um, and it should become very clear once you're reading about Baptiste and what he's doing, that this is a completely different society that is not our modern day world, right?
Yeah.
Whereas Esther was very much our modern day world, like modern day like colloquialisms and just normal things and self-driving Amazon trucks and stuff like that. Although I didn't do them by name. And, you know, so it should be fairly obvious that a significant amount of time has passed, particularly when they start talking about, you know, the civilizational things and the two apocalypses, right? But I don't specifically say how many years. But all of that, for me, comes down, not all of it, but a lot of it comes down to there's that moment where A11 is uncovered, right?
Hmm.
So A11, A11's chapters are basically even before Esther's, because A11 was
Mm.
fighting the U.S. Civil War
Mm.
prior to World War III. Also, I don't know if we're gonna have 10 years, but so A11 was in that war, and then he's recalled to like basically the stasis bunkers, and that's actually before Esther. But the way I'm deviating a bit here, but
No, you're good.
even when I get to A11's chapter, you're reading Sophus's POV when they're in Bunker 23, and they're given the documents by Baptiste, and he's like, "Where the hell did these documents come from?" And they're schematics of this bunker, and then the last page is Central States of America, Department of the Army or whatever, right?
Hmm.
And then the very next chapter is A11. So that's my thematic transition, right? It's like,
Mm.
okay, it's like, whoa, this is from the past. Now my next chapter is a POV from the past. Now, is that going to, like, are some people not going to get that? I'm sure. But hopefully, again, it'll make sense. But it's hard for me. It's hard for me to not just say, like, and I've actually been in my Word doc ready to edit it. And the first A11 chapter, I had written the words Montana 2035, and then I deleted it. Then I put it back. Then I deleted it. Then I put it back. So honestly, it's hard. But there's the scene at the end where A11 is effectively resurrected after putting itself in duckling mode,
Yeah.
and its logs are spitting out, and it says possible chronological anomaly, time past 438 years or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And that moment, it's just like I just love that moment so much, like because it's like you're like, oh, A11 was underground for 450
Yeah.
years, right? And it's like it's such a payoff. It's such a payoff, um, that if I was to just lay it out beforehand, it would be nothing. It'd just be
Yeah.
nothing, right?
People would
But
be like,
but I
"Oh, we
get
already
it.
have
Like
that information. We already know this."
I get it, and it's hard, and I still struggle with it because I know that some readers do as well. Um, but yeah, I'm trying to. I feel like I've had more you kind of just have to go with it with the median, and I feel like more
Hmm.
people have enjoyed it than hated it for the same reason, right? Um, but I'm curious what you think. Like
Oh yeah.
honestly, like so, and I know that you're a bit confused in book two, but in book one, like from what I remember when you were messaging me, it seemed like you had got kind of the time flow.
Yeah. I don't think I don't think I like fully grasped like exactly at what point in that 438 years that passed like the second apocalypse happened. I think that's pretty much the only outstanding question I had. But
Hmm.
yeah, I very much prefer that you don't just put like 30 years later and 400 years later. They're like putting
So
exact dates
like
on everything.
honestly, like you prefer that I don't.
I prefer that you don't, yeah, because I
Interesting.
mean I feel like it kind of shows that you're like trusting the reader to pick up on this stuff, but it also shows
Yeah.
that you're thinking about like how am I gonna show this rather than just sort of telling like, oh yeah, this is how much
Yeah.
time passed.
And
And
displacement
yeah.
is important too, right? Like
Hmm.
I want the reader to feel a little bit displaced, not just not pissed off, but to be like, man, there's like a lot of crazy stuff happening here. How's it all going to converge? And then it does, and then hopefully there's like, oh, cool, right?
Yeah, you're making us work for it, and I feel like the fact that we have to work for it just increases the investment. Like maybe some people will bounce off because they just don't want to put in that work or they just don't get it or whatever. But for the
Yeah,
people who do enjoy the work, I feel like that just helps them enjoy it even more. So
that's awesome.
I
No,
very
I
much prefer
appreciate
it this
that.
way. It's
I
subtle.
Yeah, it's hard. Like, something that I'm hoping to do after the third book is out, after the trilogy is done, is to do an omnibus,
Mm.
like a special edition. And what I actually might put in there is kind of a glossary to say read chapters in this order if you want 100% chronological
Oh, that's a great
timeline.
idea.
So that might be an interesting experience, right?
Yeah.
To actually read through everything in the order that it happened. Because even in the first book, there's that whole Genesis part, which goes back a bit. And it's like, this is how this all got started, right? With Mother Rebecca and the conspiracy and everything. But yeah, that's something I've been thinking I might do is like a character glossary and a timeline, and hopefully some illustrations, just for folks who either are struggling, like in the moment, or might want that experience. It might be interesting.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great idea. I I feel like it's already I can tell it's already going to be worthwhile to reread the trilogy after the third book because like we were just talking about, you do have to work and you're going to miss a lot of details and you're going to be a little confused, but I feel like once the puzzle's like all set down in the end, it would be so interesting to go back and like know what's going on every step of the way, and I feel
Yeah,
like I'll just appreciate it so much more at that point.
yeah, that's awesome. I hope so. I hope so. And it's like book three has been a bit painstaking because I have been making sure that I reference very specific parts of book one,
Hmm.
including like dialogue, things that characters experienced or saw, just so it is all wrapped together and pulled together. And I'd had the whole thing roughly planned out before I started writing it, but it's almost there. And yeah,
Nice.
I hope that's the case. I hope it'll be like it's going to be kind of full circle in a way. So we'll see.
Nice.
Yeah,
Yeah, I feel like you did that a lot in book 2 as well. Like
yeah.
it's things like the Chief Slayer, like she's not really mentioned in book 1, but you sort of like pick it up as you go through and like
Well, yeah, I
understand
mean,
that's
like
Mother
Mother
Rebecca.
Rebecca, she only got like one chapter in
Yeah,
book one, right? Like
like when
one kind
she's
of
exiled, right?
incidental. Yeah. But it's interesting because when you start reading the book, it kind of shifts who you think the main character is. And like for a
Hmm.
while, it seemed like Esther, but really, like a lot of the book is about Mother Rebecca and Rebecca Six, right? Her
Yeah.
daughter. And I really wanted to, book two was different. Like I did take a different approach. I was like, because in book one, it's POV this, then this, then this, and this, and back and forth, like in cycles of three or four. And I was like, let's do something different in book two where I can spend a bit more time with one POV for the first two parts, um, and then start converging people. And it was fun. It was different. Um, but I did want book two to be a bit of a breather in terms of um, timeline compared to book one.
Hmm.
So book even though
Yeah.
you got pissed off because
I,
the
I
first
wouldn't
part
say
of book
pissed
two,
off. I wouldn't say it that strongly.
even though you were like raging mad that the first part of book two is another kind of prequel, like the whole book is completely linear, right? There's
Yeah.
no bouncing at all. Um,
Yeah, you sort of
but
just like jump back, but then proceed in a linear fashion. Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, so yeah, like the things that like Sophus experienced when he was young, and Helio experienced when he was young, and Mother Rebecca and the Chief Slayer, and it's just like they're all connected. They're all having this shared experience that's going to affect them all, and yeah, yeah, it was fun. I probably would like Mother Rebecca's part in book two is probably like the probably speaking about horror, that's probably the most like horror influenced
Yeah.
part so far of the series, I think.
When Mother Rebecca's part, so like when she's underground with the
Yeah,
Great
with
Mother.
with the other sisterhood. Yeah, the Great
Yeah.
Mother. Yeah,
I I I was proud of myself. I was like, all right, there's definitely going to be a demon at the bottom of that
dude, where you? I was
escalator.
gonna ask. I was gonna ask, and I guess there's no holding back. This is the spoiler show, but I
Yeah.
always wonder. I always wonder like who's gonna see it coming, right? Because I felt like it was kind of obvious, but at the same time, like by making Mother Rebecca very uncertain and not at all expecting it, I feel like I still carried
Hmm.
the the mystery enough. But I loved that. I loved writing that chapter.
Oh yeah. No, it still
Yeah.
completely worked as like a reveal and everything. It just made me feel smart that I got it right because I was like
That's
piecing
awesome.
together. I was like, all right, he's mentioned this escalator in like 3 chapters now, so he clearly is trying to make me wonder what's down there.
Yeah.
And they're talking about the Great Mother, and I was like, that's where they got accelerant from. Esther got accelerant from a demon, so I was like,
Awesome. Yeah.
it made
Yeah.
sense. Plus,
Yeah.
then there was the added twist of like that she kills Celine, and I was like, okay, I didn't see
Yeah.
that coming.
Yeah. Punches right through her chest. That was a little
Yeah.
bit aggressive, but yeah. Yeah. Like I don't do a lot of violence, but when it happens, I want it to be violent, I guess. You
Yeah.
know, it should be horrific. You know, as violence is. So whenever, so I tend to, you know, actually, I was just talking to somebody about this the other day. Like my books are fairly low violence, kind of more than most. I would say most in fantasy and sci-fi. I'm very
Yeah.
careful with death. I don't like just throwaway deaths. There's always purpose behind it, but when something does happen, people get maimed and killed. It's not a cartoon, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, so I was just thinking to myself when I was developing that part, I was like, what would Mother Rebecca, the killer, do, right? Because she has done a lot in the name of the sisterhood, and she would kill the heretic that raised this demon, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, and it, you know it was interesting. There's been a lot of opportunities along the way for her to find home and to find to escape her loneliness, and she just can't get there.
Yeah.
But
It's
yeah,
kind of
yeah,
tragic
great
in a way.
mother. Yeah, yeah, yeah. There's a lot. Yeah, book three is going to be tough in a lot of ways, but
Yeah.
has to
Yeah.
happen.
You were saying that people expect the characters to meet up and be like, we're friends, but
Yeah,
it's not
yeah.
going to happen.
No, no, no. Yeah. Although in book three, there's a few chapters where is this actually this won't be a spoiler because we're talking spoilers and this happens in book two. So in book three, Sophus and Mother Rebecca are traveling together, and
Yeah.
it's hilarious, man. I just you know like there's almost more
Deadlands buddy
comedy in
cop
book three.
adventure.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. It's kind of hilarious because Sophus is he's so physically degraded. He's just me on paper. But just putting him in the same like vehicle in the same room as Mother Rebecca is kind of hilarious. It reminds me of did you watch Game of Thrones?
Yeah.
So Melisandre, right?
Uh-huh.
The red
The
what
Red
was her name?
Witch.
The Red Witch. Did you ever see? Oh, it was like a SNL skit or something. It was like Melisandre at a baby shower, and it was
I
just
think I have seen this. Yeah.
it was the actress playing Melisandre being very dramatic while they were trying to have a baby shower. It kind of reminded me of that. So when you envision Mother Rebecca, you can envision Melisandre, who's my favorite Game of Thrones character. But yeah, Mother Rebecca is important. Rebecca 6 is important. It's interesting. Yeah,
I feel like there's a lot of characters that I feel like are being set up to be very important. Like they go through these very like transformational moments, sort of like Rebecca 6 becoming a battle walker is pretty big. Of course, like there was Esther was like the first one who we see go through the accelerant process, and
A11 is back, right? So Aleph is back, and I mean I know some people were disappointed about him not being in book 2, but again, I'd actually outlined a couple Aleph chapters originally, and I'd started writing them. But I was like, if I put him on screen, on page, I was thinking of it as on screen. If I put him on page, again, the ending will be diminished. Because when he shows up at the end, and it's just like Rebecca 6 is like
the entire book
having
right
hard times. And then Aleph shows up and kicks ass. It's just like, if I had brought him in earlier, that would have just had, I think it would have been less, right?
Yeah.
So
no, I agree.
So yeah,
he is my favorite character, and like in the Hand of God, his chapters, especially, I think when he's fighting the Civil War, are like some of my favorite chapters.
He's just a weird psychopath with his little mannerisms and his little sayings. Yeah,
that's the best part of him. He's like simultaneously like extremely violent, but then also really funny at the same time, and it just creates this like dissonance that I love.
Yeah,
and he goes
so everybody's back. Everybody's in book 3, and some people will have more POV chapters than others, but everybody's there. Nice. Yeah.
I feel like this leads into one of my questions in the Yuval definitely won't answer this section. But like, so he shows up at the end, like you're saying, with saving Rebecca 6, and she was traveling out of the Deadlands. She didn't know sort of which direction she's going, because you can't really in the Deadlands, I guess. And I guess she ended up going south to the Sea of Screams, right?
Southwest,
yes. So then, for some reason I thought because Aleph, and I guess was there 2 other battle walkers there with him?
One. So there was 4.
Right.
There was his original platoon, and Alexis left 2 in Bastion and sent 2 to go after Rebecca 6. So it's Aleph and one of his buddies.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, so they were there specifically to go after Rebecca 6.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I was like, what are they there for? Why did they go to the Sea of
Yeah,
Screams?
that's talked about a bit more in book 3. But I think I did say, like in the news of the day at the end of book 2, where Alexis is doing his proclamation, and he says, we're at war. We've got these super powerful weapons that God revealed by parting the skies over the bunker, and we've sent some to go after our enemies, right? So
very subtle. Not to be like, we're going after Rebecca 6 or something. Like, obviously I don't know her name. But I think I read that and I was like, okay, they're gonna go to Cathedral. That would make sense to me. But,
okay. Yeah. No, man. 2 battle walkers against Cathedral, they'd get their asses handed.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. I'm really excited to see like that cliffhanger. Just you do 2 cliffhangers in a row.
Yeah.
It just made me like
and
so
I
excited.
might piss you off in
book
book 3 as well, because I might have another prequel at the beginning of book 3. It's just my style. I like to go back and then forward and then back and forward. Maybe it's like from watching too much TV. Like it's I do write in a way that, like, I think of my books as seasons, and I think of my chapters like episodes, and I think of, like, when you're watching like a really complex story as a TV show, and they'll often do this thing where it's like at the beginning of an episode, or for a whole episode, you have like the prequel episode, and then they jump back into the present, right? Yep. And it's just something I enjoy, and it's something that does add. It's never just for the sake of it. It's always for some reason of foreshadowing, or to add a bit more detail, or to explain something that happened before. But yeah, so I'm not 100% sure yet, and I don't mind saying this because I don't write my books in order. So I'm about 3/4 done book three, and I haven't written the beginning yet. And um, right now, my plan is to go back to 2042,
Mm,
which is when Esther had already become um, the first like Revenant sister.
okay.
Continuing right after when she basically goes to her first flock and she's like, "Bow down before your Messiah." So I might have a whole other sequence of Esther chapters before I get back to the cliffhanger. But
I'm down for that.
yeah, but yeah, you're expecting it by now, so you won't be mad at me again.
Yeah, now that you've told me, I have no
Yeah,
illusions that I'm going to get the cliffhanger resolved immediately.
yeah, yeah.
So that's interesting. Like, what made you want to do basically like the whole second book without any like cathedral POVs? Because I feel like that was a really interesting choice.
Oh yeah, yeah. Like no Esther either. So I wanted, I don't know, like it's a big world, right? And there's a lot going on, and I kind of, book two is interesting because what I wanted was for there to be the lingering effect of things that had happened in book one without having to keep pounding on those things. So
Mm.
even though there's not a lot of deadlands in book two, oh no, there is. Sorry, there's a ton of deadlines in book two.
Yeah.
There's no deadlines in book three.
Ooh.
I wanted Esther's influence to almost be like her character in book two, right? Like everything is happening because of her. Everything is happening because of this conspiracy, within Bastian's church, and what Mother Rebecca is trying to do, what the Ascendancy is trying to do, what Hub is trying to do, and I just I there was certain kind of yeah I didn't think Esther needed to be in it. Um, Honestly, that's what it came down to. It's not out of any kind of like trickery or anything. I didn't think she needed to be in it.
No, that's
Um,
fair.
and maybe part of that is because Mother Rebecca kind of takes her place, right? Because when you're reading The Hand of God, it seems very much like Esther is the main priestess character and Mother Rebecca is more of like a side character. And I wanted to flip that, right? And in
Mm.
order to flip it, I just wanted Mother Rebecca to have all the attention. So
Yeah, that
probably
makes
that's
sense. And
yeah.
then especially with her sort of going through a similar process to what Esther went through in the first
Hmm.
book, it sort of feels like you're setting them up to be very like conflicted there. I
Oh
mean,
yeah,
obviously.
yeah, yeah.
Let me see here. So, speaking of that sort of like accelerant process,
Hmm.
I feel like there's a lot of characters that do go through these transformative experience, like Esther when she takes the accelerant, or the prologue of the Hand of God with Rebecca 6, and now Mother Rebecca's parts. And I feel like the characters are always they're like gaining immense power, but I feel like you do such a good job of grounding it in what they're losing at the same time. So like they're losing memories or something like that. Like even A11, I think when he goes into duckling mode, doesn't he like wipe his memory drive or something? So
Yeah.
how do you begin to like conceptualize a scene like that? Like when they're really going through this process, what they're gonna lose, and what's important to you in those scenes? Asking these big hard questions.
Yeah, that's a big hard question. That's like a what's the meaning of life question. Um, yeah, I mean, like the book's about real stuff, right? It's kind of crazy. It's sci-fi. There's supernatural stuff. There's sci-fi stuff. But at the end of the day, it's about things that everybody experiences, right? Like with, you know, trying to find, purpose in life. Um, you know, something that Andrew and I talk about a lot is like faith and doubt, right? When it comes to religious belief, and what that means to you in your life. Loneliness, like familial struggle, like they're all just normal things, right? And so much of what has happened has been because of Esther's fear and loneliness, and the path that she went down in order to address that, right? The path that she was led down that would maybe not have been the path that she should have gone down. Um, so, specifically around the accelerant, you know, blood of demons. Um, there it is. Now there is nuance to that because only Esther and Mother Rebecca have actually um, consumed the heart blood of a demon.
Mm-hmm.
All of the other Revenant sisters are getting their accelerant via a clarifying process that I may or may not speak to in book 3. But it's interesting because a lot of the book again is also rooted in like Jewish and Christian theology, and something that a few people have asked me about is the Messiah, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I've asked them about it, and I'm like, I have some great friends I've met on Twitter. I'm like, what do you think about this? And uh, Sarah Pirchala, who is a really great reader, who's been a really great advocate for my books and Andrew's books. She made a comment which was something along the lines of, well, it's not my Messiah. And I'm like, no, it definitely is not, right? So it's interesting because I think that some people read it and they might think it's like a throwaway thing. It's like, oh, I'm either being like blasphemous, or I'm just coming up with things because they sound good, or they smell good. But it's really about I mean, a lot of that is around false messiahs, and of course, there's going to be like a Dune allegory there. It's similar story in that regard, but this is like a story of our times. I mean, it's a story in Dune because it's a story of our times, and people latching on to false messiahs, whether religious or political or cultural, right? And the consequences of that. So, I think that there's some ambiguity at the beginning where the reader will wonder, okay, is this Messiah figure benevolent? Is this like a good guy? Is this an angel? Man, I'm really spoiling it now. I actually wasn't going to go here. But I think by the end of book 2, you're pretty clear that it's not, right? Because for what you said, so this is my very long-winded way of going back to what you said around, so Esther is struggling. She's been chosen, but not really. She manages to kill this demon. She takes his heart. She sees her sister Miriam. She has an opportunity to say no. She says yes. She takes the accelerant and is basically dehumanized by it, right? So she's followed this false messiah and been dehumanized by it, and that is a lot of what Mother Rebecca talks about in book 2. She, as her accelerant was wearing out, because there's effectively this like half-life where you have to re-accelerate every number of years, and as hers has worn out, that's when she started caring more about her daughter. That's when she tried to bust her daughter out of the spire. That's when she started having feelings for Helio. That's when she was starting to feel really like weak and human and facing death and facing the things that she had done. And then she takes the accelerant and it's gone. She's basically like re-empowered and dehumanized. So in terms of how I conceptualize that, I don't know, man. It's just in my head. And it's just an extension of things that are archetypal. They're archetypes. that have been with us for thousands of years, um, that are just repeated in different ways.
Yeah, no, you explained it great. Like, I think there's something so poetic about how, like, in order to sort of fight the demons, Esther needs to become part demon in a way, like take
Yeah,
the
and
demon
there's gonna
blood.
be more on that. There's gonna be more on that in book three, because again, it was her choice, but I won't say more about that.
So, I I guess with Rebecca 6, like she sort of goes through a similar sort of thing where she's transformed, she's put in the battle walker. There's accelerant involved in that too, right? Am I wrong about that?
Yeah, well, I mean, she's so the whole thing with the numbered is this, the story behind them is so again another thing that the accelerant does is sterilization. So
Mm.
the first numbered was born when her mother's accelerant was wearing out, and she had some frivolous activity with a somebody outside the sisterhood. And then Esther kind of latched onto this, and so there's again this notion that and Mother Rebecca talks about this, that you know, like creation is actually um, uh, destroyed. That's not what I'm trying to say. Like creation is suppressed
Mm.
by the
It's like
accelerant,
prevented.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Rebecca 6 is the product of kind of a accelerated revenant mother. Um, and then they have their whole program. Most of them are born, with deformities or other issues. Most of them don't survive.
Hmm.
And the whole point of them is um, uh, Esther is effectively Esther failed, right? She tried to save the world. She backtracked at the end in the war against hell, which I'll talk more about in book three. And then she's like, okay, this is a miracle from Messiah. These numbered, and we have these war machines from the past that we can't use because the AIs are all dead.
Mm.
And so she constructs this whole plan of, because they're born with this tactile telekinesis, right, which is different than what the Revenant sisters have, which is more just they're just very powerful. She basically constructs this plan that her children are now going to save the world. They're going to do what she didn't do. So there's this whole theme, and I posted about Twitter on this. There's this whole theme that again is connected to the Bible of the binding of Isaac, where Abraham's told to sacrifice a son, and he goes ahead with it, and it's stopped at the end. And in this case, it's kind of an inversion of that, where Esther continues to sacrifice their children, right?
Mm.
And the consequences of that are, a lot. So that's another general theme that goes throughout the book, is sacrificing future generations for our own sins, I guess. And so
Mm.
that's kind of a theme with Rebecca 6 and with the numbered, and and then she's basically reduced. She's basically brought down to a head and a torso and the cybernetic interface, and implanted into the machine
Yeah.
and sent off on her way to save the world, right, along with the others. So it's all very dour. But again, not for the sake of it, right? Not for the sake of it. It's
No.
there's a point to it, but yeah.
That's one thing I feel like I can always trust in your writing. It feels like there's everything has meaning. Even if I don't
Yeah.
fully understand what it is at the moment. It still feels like there's so much like symbolism and just this deep mythos informing what you're writing here.
I
And
try it.
I feel like that's why I'm able to be like a little annoyed the cliffhanger doesn't get resolved
Yeah.
immediately, but I'm like, okay, you know what? Like he's doing something here. Let's let him cook.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I guess Rebecca 6 sort of retains a lot of her humanity even when she's in the battle walker, right? Like there's obviously a little bit of her um, in all of our sins, like the difference between what she did and what Leah did, where Leah was just like, no, these are just people. We can't just kill them. And
Yeah.
Rebecca 6 is like, no, this is what we've been trained to do.
Mhm.
So she's obviously lost a little bit of her humanity there, but it
Yeah,
still feels like
but
there's a
then
little
but
bit
then
of
she
that little
suffers
girl.
for it, right? She
Hmm.
suffers for it in book two, and she suffers for it in book three, and yeah, I mean she's still just a girl, right? She's just still a little girl doing these things that children should never be doing, and
Mm.
yeah, it's interesting because they've been basically up until now, um, they've been tasked with fighting demons and preserving preserving the land and keeping there's this kind of sense that the Hellmouth is erupting again, like all of this the world is basically overrun with demons and then pushed back, but they're starting to come back again, and there's a little bit of that in book two, and there's definitely that in book three. um, and so this was their job. Her job was not to go and kill other people, right?
Mm.
And again, like it's not, death is not throwaway, so she is severely traumatized by it, and yeah, that'll flow into book three.
Yeah. No, it comes across really clearly. And then I also feel like some of the dehumanization of Rebecca Six is sort of just as part of her training process. It's like the Revenant sisters did that to her, like on
Yeah,
purpose. The
yeah.
whole memory of her like trying to like save the cat, but just like killing the cat over and over again. So
And if anybody's watching, not killing the cat, failing to save the
failing to
cat,
save the cat.
failing to
It's
save the
different.
cat. Yeah, yeah. I just had a conversation about this. It's funny. I was worried. I was worried that people would think that I hated cats, which I do not hate cats, or that I was just being uh, flippant. But I mean, I picked a cat because, especially to Rebecca Six, it represented, this pure, beautiful, like innocent being. And actually, it's there's gonna be some follow through into book three with that as well. And like her saving it is representative of her holy mandate, right? So I was a bit worried when I wrote it, but she does save the cat at the end.
Good.
So
I
yeah,
I feel like that wouldn't really make sense as a scene if you hated cats, because
yeah,
be like, yeah, cats are terrible. There's nothing of
yeah,
value lost when she fails to save it. It
yeah,
kind of
yeah.
reduces
If
it.
anything, I'm idolizing them.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Oh, yeah, I was gonna ask how Esther faltered at the end in her war against Hell, but I guess you're saving that for book three, so I will not
Yeah,
answer that
yeah.
or
I
ask that.
think I hinted at it in book one or book two. No, I didn't. No, I talked about her basically not finishing the job a little bit, but I didn't say why.
Hmm.
Um, yeah,
Hmm.
yeah,
Mysteries to come.
yeah.
Okay. So I feel like this is also going to be a an off limits question here. So I wanted to do a little bit of a reading from the part where Esther goes through her transformation, because I feel like it takes place in such a unique setting that feels completely different from everything else in the book to me. Like it almost feels like a virtual environment in a way.
Oh, the black plane and the white plane.
Yeah. So it's here.
Yeah,
I'll just read like a
sure.
paragraph. It said Esther
Yeah.
sat upon a triangle surrounded by other triangles within a polygon that was both infinite in size and grazed the edge of existence. It was pearlescent black, unlit, and yet she could clearly see the delineating diagonals that faded into the non-horizon. Her whole world was this single plane. Above her, an indeterminate distance away, was a second plane of existence, composed of singular light. Another her sat within it. So she's in on this like black plane, and then above there's this white plane, and
Mhm.
she's like she exists in both of them. Is this just like sort of representative of like her choice to like to go with the white plane? She doesn't do that one. She goes with the black plane there,
Uh,
or or is
I
this like an
guess
actual physical location?
it's a metaphysical location.
Okay, that
So,
works.
yeah, it's so at this point she's basically dying, right?
Yeah.
So this is she's been transposed in some way. Now, like it's a great question. and honestly, I'll give kind of a bit of a crummy answer, which is it could be anything. But it's funny actually. I think Sarah asked some questions on Twitter, and I think one of them she had asked about the geometric plane as
She
well.
did, yeah.
So I wonder if I should. Yeah. So I have a lot of me in real life. I have a lot of very strange abstract dreams, um, and in my dreams, I often dream about uh, geometry and weird like planes of existence and things like this that are almost like the nexus between existence and non-existence. And I'm not going to be able to explain this because you like explaining dreams about like walking down the street naked is hard enough, but explaining dreams about like abstract geometry is even harder. But
Yeah.
I have a lot of I don't know. So part of this is just part of this was influenced by what I literally see when I have dreams about this sort of thing, which is kind of the constituent parts of reality or math, just at its most bare. And for me, it's kind of like it's horrifying because you're in the state of existence that's so altered that it's like it's pure terror. It's pure terror.
Yeah.
So these aren't good dreams. These aren't happy dreams. They're very often like end of the world type dreams or death dreams or something like that. So I always have this vision in my head of this kind of near death thing approximating this kind of a visual. And then in terms of it is as you said. So there's this is effectively her choice, right? And I love that you're inferring it. She's in both planes. In one there is the Messiah, in the other it's her sister, and she chooses the Messiah, right? And then she takes the accelerant, almost dies, and then is effectively reborn back into the world. So yeah, I mean, I don't think there's more to say to it than that, other than she is in this metaphysical state of consciousness at the time.
Yeah, I feel like that part it just stood out as like everything is so like grimy and grungy post-apocalypse, and then all of a sudden like on the point of her near death it's just like clean lines, planes, and yeah, it just creates such a striking visual, so it really worked really well.
Yeah, awesome.
The Messiah though, I feel like we got to talk about the angel slash Messiah. Like hold on, am I understanding that they're the same character, right? The angel slash the Messiah.
Yeah.
Okay, because he says like I am Messiah, right, at some point.
Yeah.
So he's sort of appearing. He appears like a number of times in the Esther beginning part of the Hand of God. Like she'll see him like on her bed, and then she'll just like fall asleep or something, like right before she falls asleep. It made me wonder if like this is a real guy or if it's like happening in her head. Or
man, you're asking all the best questions. I feel like I planted these questions. I cannot answer that question. At least I can't answer it right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Man, I can give you my wacky theory about what I think.
Yeah, go for it. I'd love it. I love it, man. This is great. This is like the ultimate like head swelling session. It's so much fun to hear. Honestly, because like it's fun. It's funny. Sometimes people are on Twitter post like, do authors get annoyed when you send them like questions? And like, are you kidding me? Like, it's my dream. It's my dream to have somebody say,
everybody was asking me about
like, is this or is this? I'm like, oh my god, like, thank you for participating in my head. So yeah, I want to hear your wacky theories.
Okay, it's super out there, and you probably can't confirm or deny any of it. Or no, it's probably wacky enough that you could probably just
I'll try to keep poker face.
Okay. All right, so let me see. I wrote it all down here. All All right, so this, I think it's all rooted in the fact that demons are described as biomechanical, which I think is another thing that Sarah mentioned too that she wanted to ask about biomechanical demons. So in Rebecca 6's last chapter, for all of our sins, she says no one had ever explained to her why some demons were biomechanical. It was taken for granted that the beasts of hell were a composite of everything that came before, creator and creations alike. So I'm always disinclined to believe that the first explanation given for something is the actual real explanation. So I don't think that's right. It also says only some demons are biomechanical, so that's a bit of evidence against my theory here. But my theory is basically that these demons and the Messiah are sort of like interdimensional aliens in a way. Sort of like they exist in some other plane, I guess. It's always so hard to talk about like interdimensional stuff. Start sounding like Alex Jones or something. So I'm almost imagining that this Messiah is like an emissary from some other civilization that is like battling these same demons, and they were sort of drawn here by the nuclear war. That like energy signature was like felt throughout the universe or something, and they, I don't know, come to Earth for help and to like create weapons out of people who take demon blood as accelerants, because he says I want you to become like a tool or a weapon against hell. And so I have no idea if this makes any sense whatsoever. This is probably just me taking like things
No,
that
I
are meant
love
to
it.
be metaphysical and trying to
I
bring
love
them
it.
to hard sci-fi.
So let me actually like give probably like the biggest spoiler I'll ever give, which is still a non-answer spoiler.
Okay.
Um, when like I think that when a book like this, when a series like this is written, the author will always have their truth, but it is beneficial to allow the reader to interpret it differently in a way that may suit their mindset, right? So, and it can sound like a cop out, but I really, part of this actually is here. Let me answer directly. There are two possibilities, and it's actually a great theory. When I was writing the book, I was really thinking about this. I was like, how are people going to interpret this? Because the questions I thought people would ask is this actually hell? Are these actually demons? Right? And what's funny is nobody's actually asked that question yet, which is really weird to me. I'm amazed nobody's asked that question yet, other than you and your interdimensional aliens. So as I've been writing it, readers will always, I mean, when you're reading a book, it is yours to do with as you see fit. And some people will read it and they will think exactly that. It's like, oh, okay, there's been some sort of there was like a nuclear war, and then, I mean, explaining no stars and moon is a bit harder, but it can be explained. But you could potentially explain away the whole series as probably one of three things. Either kind of something that's more kind of like hard sci-fi, like interdimensional beings, aliens, that are, portals, etc., like all this kind of thing, like Pacific Rim, like kaiju's coming out of the ocean, right? So that's one option. You could explain it as cosmic horror, like Lovecraft, where you have like it's the great old ones, or it's some mythos so ancient and horrible that it predates, like modern history. Or you can take the literal approach, which is it is God and demons and hell, and this is just how they happen to exist, right? I know for me which is the truth, and I don't think I'll ever say
that is
but
that's perfect. Yeah.
but at the same time, there's something that at the same time, it might become evident in book 3 at the
Mm.
end, literally at the end. Um, but you got to be careful with that stuff as a writer, right? Because
Yeah.
like it's funny, like you again, like it's easy to be torn because, or it's easy to like you feel torn because you feel like you're copping out by giving possibilities. But I think as long as in your heart you know what you really believe it to be, I think it's okay that people can interpret it completely differently. And I think that's kind of interesting, right? I mean, it's like anything. It's like anything in the world that we try to attach, definitions to, and it's like, well, I mean, even like physics. I mean, like string theory forever. It's just like we think we know what existence is, but we probably don't,
Mm.
right? Andrew talks about this a ton in his second book, in sequel to Our Lady of the Artellect. So I think that, anyways, I'm rambling now, but it's a solid theory.
No, that I love that answer actually, because I've experienced the same thing in my own works too. It's like you have your truth of how you think about what's actually going on, but then you think about like the filter through which you're presenting it, and yeah, just allowing a lot of room for interpretation. I feel like that makes the story so much more interesting for readers. It's sort of like what you said. I think you said this before we went live, actually, but that there are certain things that you would just never want to answer because it would just give everything away.
Yeah.
Maybe this is approaching that.
Yeah, this is approaching that, right? Like even yeah, some of my answers have been approaching that, but that's okay. That's okay. You just don't need to watch this.
No, everybody's gonna watch this. We're all gonna know
This
the three
this will be
possibilities.
this will be like an unholy artifact that just exists on the internet and nowhere else.
Yep. Now I have some
Yeah.
articles on my website that basically give away the entire trilogy. I'm like, no one's ever gonna read these. It's fine. I can publish them.
Amazing.
Oh man, no, I love that answer though, and I feel like it is really just so dependent on like the frame of mind that the reader is bringing to the book too.
Yeah.
So like, as someone who's probably on the less religious side, I would say like it makes more sense for me to be like, all right, probably like aliens or even like Lovecraftian horror
Yeah, and I
and
want it to be a story
hell.
for everyone, right? I mean,
Hmm.
it's a story about people. It's a story about people trying to get through life, and there's a lot of wrapper around that. And I'm certainly not out there to preach about anything. Um, you know, so yeah, it's important, I think.
Nice. All right. I feel like that is a really good maybe final question. So I will give you one more question here that I kind of warned you about ahead of time. The same
Okay.
one I gave Elle in the previous podcast that kind of caught her off guard. So I was a little nicer to you, I think. I'm just wondering if there's anything that you're like that you love in your books, like some detail that no one has ever asked you about, and you would just love to talk about it.
Yeah.
Like, what's the thing you've
Well,
always wished you'd been asked about?
I mean, we've covered a lot. That said, Sarah like asked some really good
Yeah, her list
questions.
was great.
Although she asked who got decapitated in book one, and like
Yeah,
decapitated.
I don't remember that.
What am I forgetting about my own book? Um, but she asked about numbers,
Hmm.
and that like
Octagons and
octagons
the
and the
number
number
eight.
eight.
Hmm.
Yeah. So Bastian's church is a seven-pointed star heptagram. Seven is their number. Their number of significance. The Revenant Sisterhood is eight. There's eight flames, eight Revenant mothers. Everything is octagonal. Um, and that again, that's rooted in kind of like theology. I mean, the number seven is considered like the perfect number. The number of days it took to create the world.
Hmm.
The number seven is found quite a lot in different systems. Um, it's just very representative of kind of like a perfect, um, religious wise, like a perfect kind of unity between humanity and God. And so I wanted that for Bastion because their church is very much like it's a pretty standard human church, right? They
Hmm.
don't have crazy powers. There's the seven domains, the seven orders that make up um, the Church of Bastion, and the number seven. It occurs a lot in Judaism. It occurs a lot in Christianity. Like seven archangels. It's just it's one of those things that's just like so numbers are so like so rooted in um, ancient things that we don't even think about it anymore.
Hmm.
And I really like the number eight um, because um, you know in in so the number eight specifically in like Kabbalah represents something that's beyond natural. It's something that shouldn't be allowed to exist, something supernatural. So it's a bit of like a play between um, Bastion's faith and the Revenant Sisterhood's faith, because the Revenant Sisters are empowered. They have
Mm.
supernatural powers. They've actually gone beyond nature. They've trespassed into a domain that humans should not. Right. So that's one of the reasons that I liked the numbers. Honestly, it's one of those things that I probably came up with like even like 20 years ago for my original D&D setting, and I can't remember all the reasons, but yeah, I like numbers. I like the geometry. Um, there's also a bit of a um, there's a bit of a hint that actually is mostly in book one with Esther, and more again in book three, that speaks to her some of her having a bit of obsessive compulsive disorder. Like in
Yes.
book one, she's like
She's
she's
scrubbing
she,
herself to the point
yeah,
of
she's
like
scrubbing herself.
bleeding.
She's like checking and like organizing her shelves and stepping over cracks and stuff like that. And um, there's a bit more of that in book three, and that's been exacerbated over 450 years of life, right? And so some of the very um, you know precise, again, like kind of the geometry and the fixation on numbers and shapes and so on is part and parcel of that. It's all just Esther's head.
Hmm.
Not that this is all a dream. This is not all a dream. Nobody's gonna wake it. Esther's not gonna wake up
That was my
at
other
the end.
crazy theory.
I promise you. I promise you that. Um, what else? I'm surprised that nobody ever like asked if the Revenant Sisterhood were vampires,
They do have
because
sort of those aesthetics, don't they?
they kind of have that vibe going on. Um, I don't know, like what
They drink
else?
blood.
Yeah,
Even
effectively.
especially the underground at Bastion, like they were drinking that chalice of blood, right? I guess that's sort
Yeah,
of related to how they re purify their accelerant in a way.
yeah,
Something you
yeah,
said you'll talk more about in book three, so I won't press there.
yeah. I mean, I think I'm trying to think what's in book three that I have not talked about. I mean, book three. Yeah, no, I think that covers a lot of it.
Nice.
Yeah, yeah,
I think the only other book three thing I was wondering about is you were posting snippets of it, and there was one that said A11 stood across the highway from ALF, and I was like, wait, is there multiple A11s now? Did he like clone his consciousness? I feel like ALF slash A11 is like behind the scenes, just like pulling the strings in Bastion.
yeah. It's interesting. So, um, I'll just say you get to see both of them in book three,
Hmm.
and you get to see them in a way you haven't yet. Um, yeah, yeah, it's interesting.
Nice.
Yeah, yeah.
Man, I am so looking forward to book three. You haven't released the title yet, right?
No, I've got the title and I've got the cover. The
Oh,
cover's
nice.
being finalized. I didn't want to. It's funny. I was like all ready to reveal it, and I was like, man, I don't know. Maybe I should wait until it's actually closer to release, because right now it's looking like fall, and I don't want to be too premature and then just have
Hmm.
everybody forget. But yeah, maybe I'll do a title reveal earlier. Um, yeah, yeah. I think you'll like book three.
Oh
It,
yeah,
it covers a
I'm
lot. It
excited.
covers a lot of territory.
I'm just excited to see more A11. I want to see the charge at the Hellmouth, which we've apparently seen already. I'm guessing it's
Yeah.
the Silver City, but I don't know. I have no idea.
Yeah.
Oh man. Well, Yuval, this has been an absolute pleasure talking to you, learning
Yeah,
all the
totally.
secrets. I hope we can do it again, maybe after I read the third book, and
Yeah.
I won't be as confused about the timeline. I
Yeah.
promise.
Yeah. Hopefully not. Hopefully not. And I'm glad you don't want me to say 400 years later. So I appreciate that.
No, I love the subtlety in the story. Like, your prose is just so evocative and subtle, and it feels so dense, and there's so much meaning. And I feel like I'm just gonna keep talking until your head just explodes. So,
Perfect. That's awesome. That's awesome.
no, this has
Cool,
been
man. I
so much
appreciate
fun.
it.
Thanks for coming on here, and I guess we will wrap it up here. So,
Sounds good. Take care.
you too, man.
Okay.